Picking up from the last video I made, it was a bit of a while ago. I hadn't really played much many video games since then, how it is. Things just seem to keep getting worse, even if my mentality has been different, I feel like things still get much, much, much worse, For example, I have been off social media, at least most social media. I still use some, but I feel like I'm not the type of person that was addicted to Twitter at a certain point that I was before, right? I didn't touch Twitter in a long time. And even then, I think, like, politics and things that are happening around the countries are still, seeping into my daily life, A good example is the Charlie Kirk stuff. I didn't really care. I didn't really follow politics. I didn't even have on my feed, but somehow it still manages to seek in. And the thing is that everything I see just makes things seem to look worse. Everything seems to be getting what's the word? Worse. But are things really getting worse? Because at a certain point, what's even the point? Oh, I have to go. At a certain point, you gotta ask yourself, what's even the point of any of this? I could, what's the word? Let me go up here first. It's getting tiring, It's just getting tiring. I don't know if it was just because I was younger or something, but I remember a time where I just didn't have to worry about much of this stuff, and admittedly so. A lot of people don't have the luxury of looking what you get. That's a quote someone said to me recently, which really resonated with me, Unless you're just, lucky, you don't have those luxuries to look away, For a lot of us, I feel like we think that way, Oh, the 2010s were better in this regard, or this part of my life was better, but that's just because we have the luxury of looking away. To a certain aspect, even children are like that, They don't have to worry about a lot of other things that adults do. They have that luxury. Even as adults, a lot of us don't have to worry about stability. Well, others obviously do, right? And it's just those thoughts that make me think to myself, am I really romanticizing things a lot, Am I just, telling myself these things just because I want to imagine a better place, a better time? Or were they actually somehow better than how things are now, right? And I don't think this really means that, America's pretty much fine, because, I think it's well known, I live in North America. I don't live in America, but I live in Canada, but I'm Canadian. But, I still am relatively affected by American politics, as much as I hate to admit that. Especially since our politics is much more tame for now. But it isn't it might stay like that forever, but still. But I really don't think America's in a good place. Looking at all of that's happening is just horrible. They're even trying to overturn the Second Amendment, to certain aspects, to disallow groups from even being able to take it. And all this is just that it feels so artificial to me. None of really the stuff I see in America seems to be coming from any credible source. All these claims of right versus left or any of that. It's just so tiring at a certain point. To me. Maybe I should take the rest of my loot. And to another aspect, it's just I'm so sick of it, dude. I'm so sick of it. Every time I see something more that is like that, I just want to shut myself in. But I don't think that's gonna make anything better. Ignoring the problem and not doing anything about it, I think is one of the ways that it gets worse. I'm thinking of it that way, at least to myself, with in regards to these things. If I just sit here and do nothing and tolerate, isn't it just gonna get worse? Inaction is probably way worse than just actually doing something to advocate for that cause. You're letting people get away with these sort of things. What the heck? Twigs. This wood. Doesn't seem like it. I digress though. You know, it's just like at a certain point, I kind of get why people kill themselves. You know, I look at the state in America, and I think I would have killed myself too if I had to deal with a fraction of what they have to do there, especially with like gun violence and other things. You know, it's just so bad. I don't really know at a certain point, but like even things here just seem to not be getting any better. You know, even with the state, it just doesn't seem to be getting better anywhere across the board. And I don't know if it's like a global thing or not, or like what's even happening at this point. But it seems orchestrated to me, you know, like these sort of things, especially when certain people or certain groups are benefiting a lot more than others, and we all know who that is. But especially what's the word, capital wise, you know. But I don't really. Oh, it's diamonds. Nice. Probably get out of here. But you know, I tell myself that like one day it's gonna get better. One day it's gonna get better. And you know, at a certain aspect, I'm starting to not believe that anymore. You know, as much as I tell myself, it doesn't seem like it's gonna get better. But like, what do I even do at that point? You know, like, do I just is that more diamonds? Jesus Christ, this place is loaded with diamonds. You know, at a certain point, what do I keep telling myself? I don't. I just. I'm so. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do right now. It's just so like scary as well. You know, all these things in the world. Wow, Argentinium. Ah, shite. I'm gonna die, aren't I? Oops, that's not good. But I don't know, man. This is like one of those few things that recently has just been just keeps bugging me. You know, like I'm trying keeping a positive mind. I'm getting better in every other thing, but there's not much I can do about the world. You know, there's not much I can literally do to change the world. And the thing is, I'm just in my early 20s too. There's no certainty for the future. Things like that are scary. You know, it's just scary not knowing that things are certain. At a certain point, you got to think of the cost. What's the word? Cost, risk, benefit. And you might just have to hang yourself kill yourself, you know, like I think of it a lot, you know, just is it better that way than to having to suffer? And it's not because I'm suicidal or something where like I think it's actively better. It's just is not having to experience better than experiencing. There's a certain aspect you gotta think of like that just as chickening out or like being too scared for confrontation that you do that, right? I think this is the way. There we go. But I don't know, man. I'm tired, dude. I'm so tired. I don't know. Like, do I join like a youth group or something? I cannot tell you what I should be doing with my life right now. But isn't that life itself? Isn't life itself just not knowing what is gonna happen next? I really, really wish I could give a more concrete answer. Or a better video, in fact. This is probably one of the worst ones I've made in this crappy ass series that nobody watches anyways. Maybe it might blow up one day, we'll see. Maybe one in the future this will blow up and then everyone will be a fan of mine. Well, maybe not today though. Goodbye.